Welcome, Dr. Darshan Mehta. Are basically trying to take the knowledge of people like you and cumulatively to the consumer, to the person. We are focused on lifestyle diseases, whether stress or hypertension, diabetes, obesity. And we are trying to develop methods of whether it's packaged in a workshop form, in a talk form, you get admitted to a place for 10 days or whatever be the case. But we are looking at how to, because this curve is not bending. We have an ascending curve in India. And maybe coming from nutrition, it's coming from wherever, that's not the issue, but it's ascending. So we're talking to people like you from two perspectives. One is what is happening in the Western world with regard to lifestyle disorders. Where is the silver lining that you have seen which could possibly reflect within us in India? The other thing we are wanting to know is that in your areas of interest, I see a very interesting aspect written of behavioral change, which seems to be a big thing happening in lifestyle disorder at least. So we like to, I put all the questions for you, and you can now please address them as you feel the flow is.
Okay. I think there are two important things you raised. One is, what's happening in the West. One of the interesting things, India has its own innate wisdom, often looks to the West for justification. So I can just say, with true humility that, we actually, in India, we do have the solutions, because it's almost the other way. The West has adopted them to some degree. They've recognized it, and part of it is through research. So as you know, at this conference, we've talked a lot about meditation and its different values and what it can do at the level of the gene, at the level of the brain, at the level, then at the society level. And we know comfortably now that when people begin to just adopt even the simplest practice, it has a profound effect on a society level. So we have to begin to think, how can we actually deliver this to the masses? And what is it going to take? And that, I think we're going to have to look to the people to find the answer. In the United States, what has happened is that now that we are educating our doctors, as someone who is a faculty at medical school, we talk to our doctors about lifestyle. And actually our own medical students have recognized, because they're very smart, and they know that
they're also human beings there, and they're maybe having suffering from similar problems.
Yes, but they also recognize that the research is there. The older doctors have chosen to ignore the research, but the research is very compelling, and it shows that simple lifestyle changes make huge population effects, and that's what. So, for example, the research shows that having a plant-based diet is very good.
Wow.
And more in the United States, it's no longer it's actually considered that should be how we should be educating our patients to become more plant-based. Now, does that mean pure vegetarian? Probably not. But even if you make a shift, if someone who is eating meat 70% of the time and now they decrease it to 30% of the time, that's a big difference. And so that's one of the things that I think is very simple. And there's that. Second, we think about meditation. Many people think about meditation in a religious and spiritual context, and I don't take away from those origins. But for the common person, that's still a very hard concept, and we don't necessarily, there's a phrase in English that you don't want perfect to be enemy of the good.
Right.
So even if someone learns, if they're driving in their car in traffic and someone immediately goes, all of a sudden you know that anger comes up.
Right.
All these hormones that we're learning about here, they get activated right away, and all of a sudden, and when you have that happen every day, day in, day out, that's when you get all these lifestyle complications. So if they even learn that in these moments when you have that anger, that you can then you take a moment, you pause, and even if you take 1 minute to just breathe and just meditate, that in and of itself has a long-term consequence. Because if you do 1 minute multiple times a day, who's to say that's worse or that could even be better than doing a 60-minute meditation?
Correct.
We don't know that. But we know from exercise, our research in exercise, that doing exercise 5 minutes 10 times a day is just as good or even better than doing 45 minutes continuous. So we have to rethink of how we actually are teaching some of these concepts, because this is, if you think about lifestyle, then lifestyle means that it's part of your life all the time, and that means you're not having to go somewhere, go to a cave and do meditation, or go to silent retreats. Again, all these things have benefit, not to say that they're not important, but for the common person, it's about what can I do day in and day out with the horns of the cars and with the, all the hustle and bustle. I have to be able to practice these.
Or the daily challenges at the job.
Of course, and and so I think those are the really important things. And then finally, it is important. I think government and wealthy individuals, people who are they have a responsibility to the people, and they have to be able to fund some of these projects that help us understand what can we do at a population. And I don't know how, at least in India, how that is being addressed. How is the government putting forth money? I've had the fortune of meeting with the Prime Minister, and I know he's very interested in it. But I know politics are complicated, and until you begin to see this is a fundamental issue on how we take care of our society. We have some of the wealthiest people in the world who live here in India, and they have an inner responsibility to really help address this in a broad way, if truly we want to be a contributor to society.
Dr. Mehta, I would like to ask, you are at a pinnacle in terms of a very, very prestigious organization like Benson Henry. When did you leave India? I mean, what was your last time when you departed to go to the US and study there? When was that?
So my parents immigrated. I was born in Ahmedabad, but my parents left when I was 1 year old. So
do you come often to India?
I come usually every 4 or 5 years. In the past 2 years, I've been able to come 3 times, so it's been really lovely to be able to address.
With regard to what are the key 3 things that you observed in terms of a huge change that you see, even if you do, let's say 1, 2, 3, when you now observe India, when you come intermittently, what are the changes you have observed?
Well, I think there's no question that people live more stressed lives. There's no question about it. Obviously people have financial worries and financial pressure, and that's similar to many contexts in the world. Second, we know that there's lifestyle disease. It's obvious. It's you see it around you. We actually probably, while I know there are always people who don't get enough food, but the problem in India is that most people are getting too much food, and low quality food. And so we haven't done a good job of educating our public. And then the third is, we think of environment and how do we treat our environment. And I know, again, things like water, sanitation, cleanliness, these things are improved tremendously. But still we have a long ways to go.
I'm glad you say that, because there is always a pro and con. When the Prime Minister starts talking about Swachh Bharat, people say, well, what is the need for the Prime Minister to talk about clean, and let him go and do it, not realizing it could be central to our very existence.
Absolutely. It's a public health issue. Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, and again, this is, if we actually did, we continue to do this, then, even at this conference, we have water bottles, and why would we need any of that? Right? But why are we doing it? Because, maybe the water is contaminated, so that's why we should make sure we have these, So I think then all of a sudden that has an impact that reduces waste. We talk about, we're in the holy city here, and the Ganges River, it's at least here it doesn't seem but downstream it's very polluted, right? So that's a tragedy. That is a true tragedy of when you have such a important spiritual place that we on one hand say, this is the most spiritual place. People will buy the water to get from here, and yet in some parts of the river, it's the dirtiest water in the country. So
I just want to ask you another. It's very interesting what you're saying, and believe me, I'm getting so intrigued by what you're saying. I'm forgetting to even ask you the kind of questions I wanted to, but I'll try to recall. at Benson Henry,
Yeah.
I'm sure the research on adaptation and adoption of ancient sciences of
Yeah.
India into the modern medical practice, how long did it start, and where has it reached in terms of velocity and depth?
Yeah. So, Dr. Herbert Benson was actually originally was influenced tremendously by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and his original work started at that time. And so the science at that time was, he did the best science with the technology he had available then. Today it's, our science has advanced tremendously, and so we're using the advances in science to, again, validate what are the ancient rishis, sages, seers were describing. But now we have a new set of language that we can use to describe their experience. But this is about the personal experience. And I think, so what has happened in the United States is that when you can use some of this new vocabulary, all of a sudden doctors, physicians, the medical students, the medical community at large, they cannot ignore it, because it is very relevant to the understanding of science.
Right.
And so that becomes, to me, that's where we are. So it is moving fast-paced to the degree that even at Harvard Medical School, where I'm a faculty member, the students themselves have demanded to the dean and the chancellor of the institution that we need some training in meditation.
Yeah, wow.
And so as I said in my comments yesterday, the students have the greatest power here. Here we may, it doesn't mean you don't respect your teachers, but if the students unite and say that, yes, this is important and this is part of good science, the faculty can't say no.
This is very good insight, very good insight. I just wanted to ask you that we have the youth here.
Yeah.
And you're observant as you come intermittently.
Yeah.
And then we have the youth in the US, which you are staring almost every day.
Yeah.
What are the adoptions they have done? For example, have they changed a lot in nutrition? Have they changed a lot in yoga practice? Have they done a lot? And so if you break it down, where has the adoption happened the most?
The most right now, at least in our local area, has been with nutrition. So the students themselves demanded that our cafeteria provide for healthier choice. So the administration and the deans, and they all had no choice. So on one hand, we're talking about being healthy, teaching, and yet we don't have healthy choice. So again, that has been the biggest place. Second, as I mentioned, is they do want to learn about stress reduction and really learn how can we have this in our day-to-day lives. But it has to be practical. This is like they have so many pressures of obviously learning. When you're seeing patients, there's so many pressures that are put upon them. So really, and we're learning too. As of somebody who's a faculty member, I don't know yet what the right answer is. But long as I choose to learn with my students, we'll come up with a better plan.
Dr. Darshan, I don't want to hold you back. You have important sessions to attend, but I'll leave you with a request. Of course, I thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. We took our time. I'd like to leave you the request. We are basically passionate at our end to take the kind of opinion, the kind of changes that you and many others can put together is to be part of our journey. We will write to you and we'll see that we keep you engaged in the Indian context. Because I think over here we have an epidemic situation with the kind of volumes we're dealing with and the kind of support structure that we're seeing. So the solution is not lying in impacting slowly. I think there is something required that bursts the bubble fast. Otherwise we are really heading somewhere which will go totally out of control. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you.